Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Austin Private Wealth, a registered investment advisor focused on fee-only financial planning and investment management. Their mission is to serve affluent clients with personalized financial advice, fostering a trusted relationship that will endure for generations to come. Austin Private Wealth is not just about managing wealth. They're about inspiring you to embrace a future filled with possibilities and helping you architect enduring legacies. Their core values of integrity, service, caring, excellence, and growth are at the heart of everything they do. Connect with them today at austinprivatewealth.com.
Austin Private Wealth is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Austin Private Wealth and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Austin Private Wealth unless a client service agreement is in place. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
Austin is adapting to and building the future in real time. I'm Michael Scharf. We are exploring and driving our transformation into the next innovation powerhouse.
I'm Jason Scharf. I'm a bioresearcher at UT to the assembly line worker at Tesla, from the musician on 6th Street to the coder at Dell. And with the founders, funders, and early employees at the next great startup, we are all Austin Next. Austin Next is still on the road, and today we're visiting another point of the Texas Triangle. Houston's been on a tear the last few years, growing from about $400 million in startup funding in 2018 to crossing the $2 billion threshold last year. There's the Texas Medical Center, the ION, Rice University, and many other influential and growing institutions. Today we dive into the Houston innovation ecosystem with Lawson and Chris Buckner, the forces now behind Houston Exponential. Lawson is the founder and partner of Gow Companies, a holding company at the intersection of sports, media, and innovation. He's also the CEO of Houston Exponential and the Chief Strategy Officer of SportsMap Tech Acquisition Corp. Prior to these projects, Gow founded The Cannon, a network of startup innovation hubs that provides startup businesses, investment groups, governments, corporations, and other strategic organizations with creative workspace and a variety of innovation solutions. Lawson is a board member of Central Houston Organization, an entity responsible for managing much of the funding and strategy associated with the growth and development of downtown Houston, and also a member of the Houston 2026 World Cup Bid Committee. Chris Buckner is currently the co-founder of Pucka Talk, the largest sports festival in the world to be held in Houston in the fall of 2023. Chris is also one of the partners and CRO at Houston Exponential. In his past, Chris was the co-founder and CEO of Mainline, an esports tournament software and event management company focused primarily on the collegiate market. In addition, Chris co-founded FanReact, a social CMS licensed software company, was the host of the FanReact Hour, a nationally syndicated radio show, and the co-host of an all-new esports television show, The Meta, that aired locally and on Twitch. Lawson, Chris, welcome to the Austin Next podcast.
Thank you for having us. This is we do our own show, so it's kind of fun to be on the other side of it, getting grilled.
Yeah, no, very excited about the conversation. Thanks for having us.
And that is by the plan, by the way. It's just absolute grilling, just be firing left and right.
Yeah, really hard hitting.
This is an ambush interview. You just don't know it yet.
Good. I'm sweating.
All right, so we're going to start really, really big, 100,000 foot level. Describe the Houston innovation ecosystem. What sectors are here? What are the big companies? What type of areas are VCs funding? Let's just kind of start at the big picture.
That's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's why he said big picture.
Yeah. Well, I just read a stat that Houston is growing at 10.5 times the speed population growth as Chicago. So we're very soon going to be the third largest city in the world. And we, until very recently, have been a pretty significantly underperforming innovation economy and kind of startup community here. And there's been this big push over the last 6 years to really get it right and to catch up. And our neighbor, Austin, has just done such a better job of it that I think we've got sort of a chip on our shoulder in that regard. But the 30,000 foot view of it would be that we're a big town with big legacy industries, and we are just starting to kind of figure out what kind of tech sectors we can develop and sustain and how we can leverage those legacy industries to develop kind of a more fast-paced and higher velocity startup ecosystem.
But you would say that it's been led traditionally by the energy sector. We do have a pretty strong kind of the medical side of things. We're trying to obviously work on the sports piece, but traditionally it's been that energy.
Yeah, the whole history of Houston is founded in 1837. Oil made everybody a lot of money. They turned around and spent a lot of that money on a gigantic medical district. And those are the two actions or activities that support most of the jobs here. Mm-hmm. And everything's kind of evolved out of that.
Yeah, I was just at TMC just a week ago, and it is hard to fathom how large it is. And then, of course, recently with the Bioport being announced and how much it's growing, I think it's and then TMC 3. And
the Helix and stuff like that. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Well, the build out itself is in the shape of like a DNA helix.
Mm. And it's tons of money. And they're doing amazing stuff at TMCX as well. But yeah, it's definitely been led by those two.
And how have you seen the interactivity between those two? Has it purely been from hey, we made money in oil and gas and now we're going to be spending it in medical? Or has there actually been intersections of talent and way things are being done? I mean, my background is all in kind of the life science biosector. And when I think of what's coming out of Houston, it tends to be very traditional therapeutics, med device. So how are you seeing kind of those sectors start to interact with each other?
I don't think there is a lot of interaction. There's one group that sort of encapsulates the interaction or the crossover between the two. It's called pumps and pipes. And it's like engineers and scientists who are kind of talking about the mechanical and scientific overlaps between the way that the human body works from a mechanical perspective and the way that support most of the jobs here. Mm-hmm. And everything's kind of evolved out of that.
Yeah, I was just at TMC just a week ago, and it is hard to fathom how large it is. And then, of course, recently with the Bioport being announced and how much it's growing, I think it's and then TMC 3. And
the Helix and stuff like that. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Well, the build out itself is in the shape of like a DNA helix.
Mm. And it's tons of money. And they're doing amazing stuff at TMCX as well. But yeah, it's definitely been led by those two.
And how have you seen the interactivity between those two? Has it purely been from hey, we made money in oil and gas and now we're going to be spending it in medical? Or has there actually been intersections of talent and way things are being done? I mean, my background is all in kind of the life science biosector. And when I think of what's coming out of Houston, it tends to be very traditional therapeutics, med device. So how are you seeing kind of those sectors start to interact with each other?
I don't think there is a lot of interaction. There's one group that sort of encapsulates the interaction or the crossover between the two. It's called pumps and pipes. And it's like engineers and scientists who are kind of talking about the mechanical and scientific overlaps between the way that the human body works from a mechanical perspective and the way that pipes work in oil and gas. But it's sort of a forced stretch almost to try to kind of find common ground. And I don't really, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that there's like a gigantic overlap.
No, I don't think so. I think they kind of stay in their own lanes. I think it's kind of funny though that it started by the support of the oil and gas was like, let's do this, and it's been great. I mean, what you would say we're kind of in the top 2 or 3, Boston and us when it comes to med tech and the initiative. So I think it's good.
It's interesting because one of the stories that I've seen over and over again is the energy guys getting together with the blockchain guys. Mm-hmm. And that became a story last year after China kicked all the miners out. Have they come and stayed? Have they come and just taken their money and gone? What's going on there?
I think that the, quote, energy guys are starting to educate themselves on more kind of future-looking and more tech-based kind of innovations as ways to continue to evolve their industry. But it feels slow. I think we were talking about this the other day. Well, I don't think I know that those legacy industries that we have here, kind of biotech and engineering and then you could even broaden it to say kind of like space and kind of harsh environment work and industrials and stuff. A lot of that stuff doesn't really can't be easily lent to kind of evolving into being at like an innovation sector. They're sort of famously siloed and red taped and bureaucratic and cautious because they can be, they're dangerous and there's lots of IP but they're not fast paced and porous and innovative by nature. And so it's been harder for Houston to leverage their legacy industries because of the nature of those industries than the time other cities have had kind of leveraging their inherent capabilities and strengths to emerge as a leader in different tech sectors.
Where do you think Houston fits, though, with the post-COVID or the during COVID realization of the unsexy stuff really matters? Supply chain really matters. Manufacturing really matters. We're seeing much more of the, deep industrial manufacturing technology. When we talk about all the things you just said, space, all these harsh environments, very physical, has Houston pivoted into that since that becomes more of an innovation space? That you're also seeing some, I think, cutting through the tape with things like SpaceX and Anduril, and that the legacy sectors are actually seeing some innovative companies now, right?
Yes, we own the unsexy stuff here. We embrace it, and Houston is not a sexy town. It's a multicultural, gritty, real town that isn't trying to make the next dog walking app. We're trying to innovate in real ways that allow us to save lives, change lives, and find new worlds.
And
really
create the next cat walking app.
Right? Yeah, it's about cats.
Big cat industry.
We're just really against dogs for some reason. But actually, no. One of the challenges for Houston has been the sprawl. And when you talk about creating innovation districts, density and collisions and cluster economics come into play, and that's really hard when you're so sprawling. And there's not like one downtown Houston. There's like 8. It's like fiefdoms of like megaplexes that are all just bound together by connective tissue.
Did you know that the tallest building in the world that is not located in a downtown region is here in Houston?
The Williams Tower?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's the tallest building in the world outside of a downtown region.
So that's representative of just these like business clusters that we have that are loosely bound by the borders of the city. And if you read anything about innovation districts, it reads like a how-to manual for like spreading disease. It's like collisions, interactions, jamming people, mashups of people interacting with each other and like sipping coffee out of the same cup. Like it really placed a lot of emphasis on density and human-to-human interaction. And so then the question was, what does an innovation district look like in a COVID and then post-COVID world? And it required not totally digital, not totally physical, but like a sort of a phygital solution.
Did you just come up with that?
Yeah.
Is that your thing?
It's pretty good.
TM.
Actually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Breaking ground, right?
Yeah, I know, right now.
Yeah, right. These are the hard cutting topics that we're going to get into, but that I think hurt other more developed, more dense, and geographically mashed together innovation districts in other communities than it did Houston, because we're really sprawling and we're already a little closer to figuring out ways to interconnect and be dynamic and be collaborative without always having like everything happening within an 8-block radius of walkability.
Right. I mean, one of the things that we've been digging into the history of Austin is that, 15 years ago, it's like, yeah, everyone was at the Four Seasons downtown. That's where you ran into everybody and all that. And then now we are starting to have what Austin is not downtown Austin. It goes from Bastrop up to Georgetown, down to San Marcos. And so we're having that sprawl. And then it is becoming, I think, in many ways, those kind of mini sectors, right? And that's one of the questions that I've been thinking about a lot, as when you're going from nothing to something. And I've got a new city, and you see a lot of things like, I think with like, Brad Fell's Startup Community book and things that you think in that nature. There is this, as you said, the how-to, we got to smash everybody together. You hit some sort of threshold. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, where there is this kind of Cambrian, diaspora, right? Where everybody kind of goes in different directions. Now, what you do have is maybe the sector perspectives, like, hey, we have all the blockchain, we have all of the life science. Because one of the things that, and I wanted you to talk about the term that you and I talked about previously. When you look at like, Silicon Valley in the history, there's things in the innovation district. Like these centralized things don't exist. And so it's an interesting, when you're trying to build it from a top-down perspective, there's certain ingredients that you need, and probably if we don't have a critical mass, we need to get that critical mass together. But I look at things like Austin, like Nashville, like Houston, where you kind of gotten that critical mass. Is there one place that you need, or how do you think about driving those, as you said, driving those connections while you are physically apart, having the digital, having lots of different sectors?
There's a tension. It's a really tough question to answer, but there's definitely a tension between naturally occurring innovation districts like Silicon Valley, where there was not a playbook that could be printed then of like, okay, well, so this is a how-to manual, and we're just going to cookie cutter. We're going to apply this now to other cities. You can't extract that from what happened in Boston and Silicon Valley, and you can't even really extract it from throughout history, other kind of creative clusters that have emerged, whether that's like the Renaissance and salons or the coffee shops in Paris in the 1900s and stuff. I mean, those things just sort of emerged. There's a tension between that and artificially architecting these things from scratch, which we don't have a blueprint for really. And so some of this is still a grand experiment. But just before this, I just because I thought it'd be interesting, I Googled innovation districts and then hit news. And all of the news is on the other end of the spectrum saying like OSU declares innovation district to be here, or, you know, like said Ohio State designates this region to be. That's not how like innovation economies work.
Yeah.
You can't. It's innovation imperialism. You can't just impose your will upon a community and say, well, this real estate development that we're declaring an innovation thing is now going to be where innovation happens. That's the wild ass other end of the spectrum.
Well, and this is weird. You and I have kind of talked about this. I was with somebody the other night having a beer, and they were very passionately saying like, you can't fabricate it. And he was like, you want to know why Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley? It was because you had a couple companies that had nothing. They didn't partner together to come up with like whatever. They just like busted their ass, had a huge exit, and then they started investing in the other companies that were like kind of like in the area and taking shots. And it was like they weren't trying to turn that thing into something. It was like, yeah, there was two companies at the time, or however you want to say that like they had big wins and they had exits, and then they started pumping back in. And this guy was like yelling at me. I was like, dude, calm down. I wasn't arguing with you at all.
Stop insulting him. Yeah. But as a model for economic development for cities, you can't just be like, yeah, it'll just be, it'll emerge organically. Like, don't do anything. Be hands off. They want to have some sort of strategy for it. And I think the slip up or the temptation is that like, okay, we're going to invest a lot of money into trying to create, from a real estate perspective, the right conditions for creativity and innovation to thrive. But that's usually not involving the creators and innovators themselves. And that's where they go wrong.
One more thing about that, though. I've seen this tried several times, and the controlling entity, whatever it is, always assumes it's going to happen faster. Any incubator, accelerator, innovation district that I've ever seen that's successful, regardless of how it was started, is a 7 to 10 year process. And now maybe even longer, because now it takes a longer time to go from napkin to exit. And these entities don't have the patience, it seems, to want to go that distance. They like having the ribbon cutting. And then when it comes time for the 3rd year budget or the 4th year budget, there's no interest anymore.
Yeah. And particularly when you're talking about political cycles, the people who made those policies or were involved in cutting that ribbon, they're not even in office anymore. And so a lot of times when these things are politically or university led, there's a changing in the priorities and the people. And that's why like startup communities, the Brad Feld book, he says these things need to be entrepreneurially led because they're not going to become impatient. The community that they're growing is for them. And it should be slow because these things are incredibly complex. These are complex systems. They are dynamic, and they're movements of humans building things. It's not just policy and procedure and real estate development.
Well, on a step back, we talk about these things, especially when they're being driven, take a long time. Houston's growth over the last 6 years is extraordinarily impressive. Based on the numbers, it was like a 5x increase in startup funding from $400 million to $2 billion last year.
Well, that was based on embarrassment.
It feels slow, by the way.
We
though.
were embarrassed.
Well, yeah. First of all, yes, there was this rallying cry. I don't want to shortchange what Houston's accomplished, because on the one hand, it feels like, boy, the gears of progress are grinding at a very, very slow rate, and we're all restless. But it's a healthy restlessness that we have. On the other hand, there has been an amazing rallying behind this initiative by a large group of stakeholders, all running, sprinting at the same thing. And it's been great.
Well, I want to brag on Lawson a little bit here. Don't get a bigger head. Because, you just got big.
Well,
head.
It's a podcast. They can't see the
That's
size
true.
of my head. So.
It's large. So we had this meeting when we were starting our new endeavor together for the first time, because we've been friends for a very long time. We went and met with the city, one of the certain organizations, and we were able to get the meeting with them very, very, very quickly. And we were able to get their interest and even support in a day, essentially. And when we walked out, I said to him, I think you even joked with me. He said, man, 6 years ago, that was so hard to kind of move things forward, not on the fault of the cities by any means, but because of the work that you've done creating a lot of the innovation ecosystem with the Canon and that kind of stuff. It has opened the door to speed things up. I think wouldn't you agree? Now the city in a lot of different ways, whatever organization is very much let's kind of come up with some ideas. And I think that while it was a slow process, now it is speeding up really, really fast.
And that's the tactical question that I want to get into is you have the embarrassments, you have the, and for, you want to tell a story about it, the Amazon HQ, right?
Sure.
For what the embarrassment was. But then, okay, so everybody's running in the same direction and saying we're this time it's different, we're embarrassed and things. That doesn't actually change anything. So what tactically that was done differently this time that seems to have had an effect?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because I think when we were talking earlier, I was saying the history of Houston's innovation initiative efforts is littered with the dead bodies of failed attempts. There's been a lot of tries and fails. And I just want to note that, the Startup Genome recently ranked us the 5th in the world in terms of fastest emerging ecosystem. So whatever we've done has worked, but it definitely has not been one thing. 1991, we created the Houston Technology Center, and that didn't really move the needle in any way that any of us were happy with. And then really everything started. I never thought that Amazon was going to select Houston as the site for its second headquarters. Amazon did not think that they were going to either, but we didn't even make the top 20 of candidates when they published it. And so for some stakeholders in Houston, that was a thing that they could really sell, that they could really use as a rallying cry to people, and whatever works. I mean, whatever gets people pumped up to go and change.
Burning platforms are important. The San Diego, which where we came from, modern ecosystem came about because of the defense cuts in the 90s, and you had a very defense-based city that said, now what?
Yeah.
Right? And so people got together and said, okay, we need to look at our other things and rally together and create what became the modern day San Diego ecosystem.
Well, and so you brought up, I think you had the exact number, it's, what was it, 300 million in venture capital or funding back in 2013, 2014, up to 2.2 billion in 2021. And when you look at that, obviously that's great. But again, yes, of course, we've done things to improve things, but there are 3 companies, right, that really pushed that needle, which was, Blinds kind of started things before that big chunk came in. They were one of our big things. But you had CART, a lot of funding coming into that. You had the space, what was the...
So you started a list of 3 and you only knew one of them?
I think I knew one.
You really backed yourself in a corner there.
The space doesn't matter. The reason I bring that up, though, is that's not something that's planned where we went and the city was like, oh, good, we did this initiative in order to get whatever. It was like, well, you had 3 companies that were busting their butt and raised a ton of money, and they were here in town. And so that, I don't know, sometimes I'm like, I think that was a bit organic. It was 3 companies.
Because, and I'll relate it back to the question that you asked of what now has worked. It's because building an ecosystem is like a 9-way chicken and egg. It's not just one thing that needs to happen. It's like a million things. And those things then create the conditions for those companies to actually grow up here, attract talent here, stay here, and attract enough funding to scale here. And so it's not really an accident if you create the conditions for the accident to happen.
That is true.
But failed efforts, one was Houston Technology Center. Another was then I don't know, 14 years later, Station Houston, they're both gone. And they both were not sufficient because they were the government and big corporations saying, we're going to centralize innovation and it's going to be this one thing and everything has to be about this thing. And that's what's needed to be the catalyst. The reason that I think we've moved the needle now is that it's not been one thing. It's been like 32 things. We've raised money to fund the expansion of top tier accelerators into the city. We have Greentown Labs, that's a clean and green tech startup hub that's now expanded from Boston to Houston. We have lots of different creative co-working spaces and incubator spaces, venture funds that expanded here. We created a corporate fund of funds where we raised money from corporations to put it in to a fund.
This is the HX Venture?
This is the HX Venture Fund, yep. To go invest in venture capital funds to then spend more time looking at startups in Houston. We have literally pulled startups from Silicon Valley and other cities back into Houston in any way that we could.
That's an interesting one I want to kind of pull the thread on a bit. One of the big things in Austin has been the migration of talent, companies, and capital, right? We have big name VCs coming. We have companies like Oracle and Tesla moving their headquarters here. And then obviously lots of people. And I know Houston is growing. And I remember it was interesting just because I'm a ridiculous data nerd. I was looking at, the census data. And if I remember correctly, Houston had a larger, population growth than Austin. But I think it was something like, and I'm making up numbers, like 70% of Austin's growth was migration and like 30% was, births and the like. And it was much more on the natural growth in Houston. So where are you seeing, how is like the migration and the growth affecting Houston?
It's good. I think we are reaping what we've sowed over the last couple of years. So 2012 to 2017, more people ages 25 to 35 migrated to Houston, a third of whom are knowledge workers, however you want to define that. And so we're seeing that too. It's definitely lower profile than the headquarters and venture firms that have moved into Austin.
I think HP moved here, right?
Yeah, yeah. And Austin has seen unbelievable meteoric growth. It's crazy. But Houston's gotten to experience some of that as well. We still have struggled to attract sort of classic venture-backed tech giants here. But a lot of times, because of the energy industry here, have been able to attract a lot of talent. And it's just we've got a lot of talent locked up in big, giant, slow-moving corporations. So some of the work we've got to do is dragging them out of those environments into the startup world.
One of the things you obviously need is the acceptance of failure, the risk-taking culture. Like, is that in Houston that is pulling those people out, or is it? No,
we don't have it. Our culture is bad as it relates to startups.
Well, I'll tell a quick story, and I won't name anybody, but like there are, angel groups. There's hundreds of them, and to them, risk. It's angel. What is the actual stat for an angel investment in terms of failure of that company? It's
1 out of 10.
Yeah. Okay.
High. As an angel investor, it's high.
Exactly. And you and I have made small investments into friends' companies, and we both go, when we do that, we go, I'll never see that money again. That's what our mind goes like that, right? And then you have these people here in town who put in a little amount. They call themselves angel investors. And then it happened to me. They were very angry when things just weren't going very well. And you sit there and you go, you put in $20,000 into a $5 million company, and you're the one that's coming and like being mad. And like it just is frustrating because that's the whole purpose of an angel network, and is to take risks and invest in startups that are very, very high risk. That's why they're early stage. And that, to me, I'm very overly passionate about this because it happened to me, is like, well, hang on. What do you want me to do? Like, it wasn't even that bad of a scenario. And so just to echo, it's just not great here. The risk profile of the investors is just much more timid.
It's getting better, but there's a generational effect of ecosystems where investors just psychologically, they invest back into what they know and how they made their money. We have a lot of people here who made their money, the people who would be angel investors, they made their money in oil and gas and real estate. So they traditionally are attracted to investing into that stuff. When they are dragged into other stuff, there's at least an educational curve. if not a real sort of knee-jerk reaction to the difference in investing in those kinds of things.
Is that what drives the risk profile? Because if anything, with the oil and gas entrepreneurs here making their money in, and I don't know the numbers on the oil and gas industry, but if you sink a well, it's not guaranteed you're going to get oil.
No,
you would think the reputation is that Houston is where you go to take risks.
Yeah, you would think that like we've got the like DNA of the boundless entrepreneurialism of the Texas Wildcatter pumping through our veins, right? But it's not about risk. It's just about the category, really, for lack of a more sophisticated term. Like risk is risk. We have risk takers here, but you get comfortable with something, and that's where you are comfortable taking the risk. And we don't have a lot of successful tech founders who have had an exit and have some disposable income to invest into other newer tech founders, just period.
But at the same time, it's not unreasonable. So while I invest in this class, but I also invest in the sector that I know. So consumer brands, B2B, like I don't touch that stuff because I don't know how to, I don't know how to assess it. I don't know what looks good. So I focus all on life science and health tech and the things that I know. So at one point you're like, yeah, we need to invest. At that point, it's a completely reasonable and natural reaction to invest in what you know.
Yes. I'm not actually criticizing it. I think it's completely reasonable. I think it's psychologically very rational. But I think just as we talk about the Houston culture, there's that investor issue, but there's also just, it's not as cool to be a founder here. The universities aren't bringing other founders to the universities to say, hey, look, entrepreneurialism is a path. It doesn't pay as well as Exxon does here, And so there are a lot of forces that oppose the entrepreneurial lifestyle here. When you go to Austin, you can walk the streets and be struck by the tech founderism that is just palpable around. In Houston, you can't find it. You have to go really searching. I remember graduating from Rice University here in 2013 in undergrad and not having any idea where to find entrepreneurs. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to be a part of this big attempt at a solution, is that it's not being celebrated and it's not cool and it's not something that you can look around and find other success stories and say, oh, I want to be like that guy or that gal.
We're focusing on a lot of the challenges. I want to go a little positive for a moment.
Just doom and gloom here.
No, and one of the big things.
So we're both moving to Austin.
Well, we've been big proponents. Like personally, and I know there's this bit, the moniker is held a lot. Like I've never liked the Silicon X, Silicon Hills, Silicon Valley, obviously Silicon Beach. Because the point is, we always say, like, we don't want to be the next Silicon Valley. We want to be the first Austin. And that actually means it is something different. We're not going to look exactly like Silicon Valley, the things we can learn and so forth. And so a lot of it means you're leaning into the uniqueness and specialness of that region. So in that case, then, what would you say, the special sauce of Houston?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, when the mayor said we're going to be Silicon Bayou, I wanted to die. Like, first of all, we can't be that. We cannot, as we talked about before, there was no blueprint. We cannot follow that. Right. We can't, there is not a playbook to be followed. And
sorry, I'm only here for this.
And Galveston is so ugly of a beach.
Yeah.
And so there's just not
Sorry,
enough
but
sand.
I just had a laughing fit at that.
Yeah.
That one.
But so we'll cut all this out.
Yeah, we'll cut it.
This is all garbage. No, but so first of all, comparing ourselves to a city that creates unattainable and also directionless, a path that is, not followable and not actionable without a playbook, that's not constructive. Second is, I will also be very bothered if we start calling ourselves the next Austin. We don't need to be the next anything. We need to be an innovation city that is uniquely Houston, with its own Houston flavor. And actually, I don't just want that. That's required, because we talked about the sprawl for one. We cannot do what has worked to some degree in cities like Philadelphia and St. Louis, where we just create one epicenter, one node of action-packed knowledge spillover and collisions, because we are 600 miles. We can fit, what was I saying before this, that like Chicago, Detroit, Philly, and Baltimore could all fit inside of Houston. Like, we cannot be a dense city. We're the fourth largest in size, soon to be third, and 89th in density. We will not be dense. So we have to create our own Houston solution. We have to solve the sprawl. And there's lots of different thoughts of how we can still accomplish that. But that's just one of the many reasons why we don't want to copy a model that other cities have done. We want to create our own model.
Well, and you had the part of the question was something that we've talked about. What is the nature of the people in Houston what is our special sauce? And I think part of it is the being proud of the fact that we are a little bit more, and this is not a knock by any stretch, but like we're more like we care about rolling up our sleeves rather than having like a super hip space to work all the time. You know, like, and it sounds like I'm being judgy. I'm not. You said it better than I did, but it was like we just like we don't care about that. Like we just want to kind of get stuff done.
But you're putting your finger on sort of one of our character traits. But the larger kind of conclusion is that like for this to work and be uniquely Houston and be embraced from the bottom up, it needs to feel like Houston and be by Houston for Houston and be culturally led and tap into the kind of the spirit and the history and the ethos of our city. And if we try to just become the branding of, I mean, having the city say Houston's going to be Silicon Bayou, we're proud Houstonians. We freaking hate that. We don't want to be that. We want to be our own. We want to be Houstonian, but we want to just also evolve the city that we love into being a bigger, faster, stronger, cooler, sexier, more nuanced, more multicultural, more delicious city. And so
then what's your name for the city then?
I don't know. So I did write this article that like we're so dynamic and gigantic. It's such a sprawling beast of a city with so many different countries and backgrounds and visitors and people who didn't grow up here and people who did grow up here. And it's so complex that just saying a nickname or something that sort of beautifully encapsulates the city, I think we've always struggled with that. I mean, the Keep Austin Weird thing is great. Houston's never had a tagline or a slogan. It's never been the Windy City or the Big Apple or whatever. It's the City of Love. And I don't think we ever will. And I think that's okay.
And you know why we have two? I just realized we're so sprawling. We actually have two airports to get to the other side of the city.
Yeah.
Because Hobby's on the
You
south
just
side.
realized that.
I just realized that it's just to get up to the north. But the city was coming up with a tagline, and I'm totally just like talking.
No, we've had a lot.
Well, there was one that we liked.
City with no limits.
Yeah.
Doesn't really roll off the tongue. We've had.
I'm sure there was lots of money spent on that.
Lots of money.
Some consultant somewhere.
We've been the energy capital of the world, which is not that's just so monochromatic for Houston. I don't want that. There was one that was. I'm literally. You guys won't have even heard of these probably because we just churn through ones that are stupid and are rejected. And
you didn't like that? Never mind.
No. Yeah. So literally, there was Houston, it's worth it. Pretty uninspiring. And then it was like Houston.
That's almost like saying like. Oh, come on.
You're like, God, we're not that.
It's not that bad.
It's not that
We're
bad.
all right.
Yeah, there was one that was.
It's like they stole it out of the West Wing.
Yeah. Houston,
B plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. We're kind of all right. Yeah. There was one that was Houston's hot. Like, come on.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
It is. Yeah. Yes.
Now you're just listing facts. You're just listing weather facts.
Well, here's another one that you guys will not use because it's already been taken. But since you're about to overtake Chicago as the third largest city, it is the city with broad shoulders.
Who uses that?
They did way back when.
We can just steal it. Wait, as you become bigger than another city, you can just take it. So at some point we're like, nah, we're the Big Apple now. Like if we get big enough?
Yeah, we're the bigger apple.
Yeah, bigger apple. Yeah. No, all right, never heard of that one.
Enough about names and slogans. Let's talk solutions. Tell me about Houston Exponential.
So Houston Exponential was a sort of quasi-governmental entity that was created right around this spirited galvanization of all of the kind of ecosystem development that happened in 2016, 2017, to be the entity with the God's eye view of everything going on. There's going to be startup hubs and creative workspaces and accelerators and industry-specific kind of funds and corporate venture funds and events and classes and speakers and programs. But there needs to be, those are all chess pieces on a board. There needs to be who's the chess player, who has the God's eye view, kind of orchestrating all of this and helping fill in the gaps and find solutions for the gaps and
connective tissue.
Yeah, being the connective tissue, but also the cheerleader and evangelist for everything. And that was Houston Exponential as it was originally conceptualized.
And now?
Well, I think it started that way. We had high hopes for it, and it sort of lost steam and was under-resourced to accomplish all the things that we hoped that it would grow into. And so fast forward 2022, we acquire it to really pump it full of energy and resources to get it to where we really want it to, which is kind of ubiquitous and a driver of new solutions, and the one responsible for publishing reports and dragging venture capitalists in from outside the city, and being the microphone to the rest of the world about what's happening in Houston, and on and on.
And led by entrepreneurs. It hadn't been like for, what is it, by entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, so it was on the brink of joining the ranks of the Houston Technology Center and Station Houston. Those things that were very bureaucratic and top down and not by entrepreneurs, did not represent the voice of the entrepreneur, didn't involve entrepreneurs, which is just crazy to me. And Houston Exponential was at risk of heading down that path because these things just aren't reflective of what the entrepreneurs need, and so they don't survive. And so we're excited now that it's going to be, it now is owned by entrepreneurs who are bleeding hearts for all this stuff. We're